So we have Memorial Day weekend, and it's a time to reflect upon a very heavy topic, which is people dying um, in the military for this country. Um, but I think what's really disturbing to me about this is not only is it not um, something that's really proactively addressed. In other words, this is a time where many are just simply seeing this as an extended weekend. But I think part of that is because as a culture, we haven't really come to terms with the fact of what we want to think about ourselves when it comes to war or the role of the United States in the world. And many are not aware. And, uh, yet I think soldiers have been very frustrated for centuries, or at least since the World War One, recorded in some poems as to the disconnect between a public's official discourse and what a soldier has to go through. There's a poem I have. There's a book of First World War poetry, and a famous poet, Wilfred Owen. He wrote a poem called Dulce et decorum est, and it comes from the Latin, a poem written by Horace. And in Latin, it said, uh, um, the dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. Basically, how honorable and great it is that one dies for your country. But in this poem, he starts off. I'm just going to read part of it, where he is, and he's a veteran, a person that's experiencing war, and he says, "If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in other words, a fallen comrade, and watch the white eyes writhing in his hanging face, like a devil's sick of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, dulce et decorum est pro patria mori." In other words, how the lie, how good and glorious it is to die for one's nation. Now, this is what someone fighting in a war is feeling, very cynical. He's quoting from a classic, Horace, a Roman poet. And frustrated about the death and the real reality, the grim reality of war, and this kind of official, jubilant, celebratory ideal that people often glorify it, not really coming to terms with the reality of it because they're also not the ones experiencing it. Okay, so I think it's good to just kind of reflect upon that reality. But I have another book that I've looked through, Carl von Clausewitz on war. And basically the thesis of the book, as pointed out by the editor, is that war is the natural state of things between nation states. That a state has its own interests that often conflict with other states' interests. And it's usually resolved by one state imposing its will on the other state, the weaker state. And this makes war to be the normal condition of states. So we're kind of stuck in a world that has forced us to be in a state where war is normalized. And henceforth, most people believe that you have to have a military. And so it makes sense then that we would also, honor people who are willing to be in that position. Now, for many countries and throughout even our own history, there wasn't even a choice. You had drafts. We have this unique occasion now where in the United States that it's an all-voluntary military. People choose to take on this role, this traditional role that all nation states have had. Now, I want to pause for a moment and think about something here because, let's talk about taxes and war. And I'm going to tell you why I'm going to talk about taxes. It's going to seem like I'm being really abrupt and kind of off topic, but you'll see I'm very much on topic. Most of us believe that it is very legitimate to have a debate about taxes. If I work hard and the government takes my money, I have a right to want to know what that money is going to be used for. When I purchase something and I have to pay a tax on it, you're taking extra money from me, and I don't have a choice. You can be a staunch Republican, even a libertarian, and I would argue even a socialist. A socialist might believe in having lots of taxes, but they only believe in having lots of taxes if the taxes actually produce something and you can see the results. So in a socialist country, let's say Sweden, a socialist democratic country, a tremendous amount of taxes will be removed from your paycheck, or you'll be paying a lot of a consumer tax. But you also have childcare or free college, medicine. So for many people who support that idea, they don't like the idea that their money is removed, but they like what the results of that may make it justifiable to them. And then you have more fiscally conservative, fiscally minded people who don't think that that should be the role of the state, and that money should not be removed from the citizen in that way, that services are not owed from the state to the proverbial nanny state. And so there's this debate about what justification can a government take in doing stuff with our money that we did not give them permission to do. And I think it's a rational and healthy debate to have. When your money is removed from you, is it okay that that's happening? Now, when it comes to war, here's what's very strange to me, it seems to me, about this country. A politician will make a strong argument to defend why they're taxing, and you'll have a fiscally conservative person totally consider that BS, call it out for BS, and say, you're making a justification for this, but I'm not buying it, or I'm going to have a debate about this. I'm not just going to sit here and say, take my money. But then when the same politician says, we're going to take our loved ones, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, cousins, people who are precious to us that have joined the military under the idea that this is to protect freedom. We know a military doesn't make a political choice. A military does what they're told to do. We have an ideal of freedom. Yes, they are supposed to protect freedom. But a politician that has access to the military, a political leader, can use them for whatever operation they want on any set of interests. And all they have to do now is tell the American public that they're doing it for your freedom. And they can tell the military, we're doing this for our freedom. And then what? We were so willing to have a debate about when our money is being removed from us. But when our loved ones are being asked to be put in harm's way and also to kill other people, because that's what war is, right? I mean, a war, if one's not a pacifist and you believe that you might have to have a war, the only thing that can justify it is that the end result creates greater good, right? That not being involved will be worse. If we're invaded by another country and we didn't fight back and we have a terrible military occupation, okay, that's a bad result. If we all fought and the U.S. military fought and killed a lot of people to get those people out from invading us, we would say no matter what terrible things happened, that we justified, our fight, and we celebrate it and we say, okay, not the death and the destruction, but the end result was our freedom, and that's a positive thing, right? Okay, so war is a very critically, it requires the most precious thing, human life. And if it doesn't have the moral component, if you're not fighting for those ideals that you said, all you're doing is supporting a lot of killing. Now that's hard. That is a very uncomfortable topic, but this is real. This is more of an important topic than our taxes, right? Like, you're going to support sending people to go kill or possibly be killed, and knowing that the justification for it can only be that there's a greater good that comes out of it. But you're not even going to debate if that greater good is actually exists to do this. And then when people stand up and protest this war or the idea of the war, you call them traitors. They don't support the truth. They don't love their country. When in fact, they're not debating about whether those people should exist in the military or not. They're debating whether or not they should be used in the project that they've just been asked to. And they're questioning whether or not that is actually a necessity and that that's going to create a greater good. And it's the same kind of debate you'd be having about taxes, except that it's a far more serious one. But we don't do that here. No. Because why? I think that you should ask yourself why. If questioning the amount of war that we do all the time is considered a lack of loyalty or some sort of weakness, but debating about taxes isn't, I think you should really, kind of self-check that. It just seems to me that this is a very distorted sense of priorities. And this is why I think also right now that we don't really focus on anything related to war in this country, because it forces us to actually question this more often. And it's just not happening. And it kind of blows my mind away, to say the least. I mean, Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. Well, are we examining our lives? Are we examining what's going on? We're the world's last superpower. And yet, and we're dominating so much of the world. And we have a lot of vets coming back committing suicide right now that really have negative experiences and aren't sure themselves whether there was a greater good or not accomplished for this. I mean, remember, half this country at least supported George Bush going to war to invade Iraq, when he even admitted that Iraq did not attack us, was not a part of 9/11, but that they could, and that there's weapons of mass destruction, and that could hurt us, and that we're going to go there, and that we're going to, and he didn't say Operation American Freedom, it's going to be Operation Iraqi Freedom. And then we're going to find those weapons of mass destruction, and we're going to create a better place in Iraq. And what we have right now is ISIS. So now when we talk about we need to war and bomb the hell out of ISIS, we're forgetting that we got ISIS because we went to go bomb Iraq in the first place. So now we're left to this other question. When is this something that spins out of control and we're just not stopping it? And the people who are questioning it are not naive pacifists who just think that hugging the world is going to be a better place. It's actually analyzing what the hell has been going on. I would like to invite everybody who actually took the time to listen this far into this little rant of mine to really do a serious study of U.S. foreign policy and start asking the question, is this, are we really supporting freedom, democracy, and some elevated set of ideals in the world? Should we even want to be doing those? Is it even justifiable to go to war based on those ideals? And are those ideals even the reasons for it happening? I would argue flat out that that's not the case, and it's very easy to prove that, which I don't have time for. But it's painful. It's a painful topic, and I think that it's time to get real. And we're at a time in history now where we're going to see more turmoil, terrorism issues, refugee crisis issues, and if we've bought into all of these kind of standard narratives that don't hold weight, that aren't really defendable, then we're going to be participating in things that are not okay. And so, I just want you to think about this. We Americans, we look at when we had slavery and we say, well, I wouldn't do that myself now. That was back then. But you'd like to think you would be on the right side of things. You would like to think that if there was a Holocaust somewhere, that you wouldn't be a participant in something that was terrible. But you are arrogant to think that the moral sensibilities of anybody, any other different culture, is any different than ours. Everybody just wants to barbecue and hang out with their family, but it's the normal people who have always helped support a nation state going into some very dark places. And it's because we're being lazy thinkers. We're not challenging ourselves morally and intellectually enough. And so we have to take responsibility for that, ultimately, in the end. And so right now, if we're going to give true honor to people who died in war, we should really also be asking, you know, is it okay for any more soldiers to die in a war now? Or the wars that they're sending our troops to go to now? It just seems to me that this should be cracking open a very serious, reflective conversation that we're not having. And so I invite that. And I think that that should be something taking place at every dinner table across this country. And until then, just realize that you may care about your taxes more than the life of citizens abroad and your own military. And you should be bothered by that.